Patty, you've been sewing a long time, and I used to sew a lot more than I do now, but it was always so frustrating to have the most beautiful piece of fabric, but I couldn't find any trim to go with it.
Yeah, well, here's an idea. If you wanted some trim to go with something like this, I got to thinking, well, if I put a trim on here, I'd have to take one color, and where in the world would I even find one of those colors? So I just decided to get this lace and
The
paint
beautiful
it.
lace.
And you actually can paint it, having, you could dye it, but it's all one solid color. And with paints, you can mix and keep on dabbing a little more on
Some
it.
darker, some
Yes,
lighter.
yes. And so it's a lot of fun too to see what you can get. And I really came out pretty successful with the coloring on this
Yeah.
to go with every color in the book in this
Right.
fabric. But
And you were mentioning about some things we could have dyed this, and it could have been all one color.
right.
But this even has a little of an ombre look to it. It's lighter, darker.
Hand dyed looks so much more interesting than
It
just a
does.
solid color, because sometimes it doesn't really come out as solid as you want it to. And that's
And you
the way
can't
it is
really
with
go
me.
back and do a spot because it'll
Right.
mess up everything else.
Exactly. So you can kind of cover your mistakes when you
This is
when
pretty.
you
I
do
like this technique.
Yeah, and that's just kind of like playing like a rainbow, you know. You do a couple of different colors, and you always wet the lace. So the best thing to do is wet the lace first. If you want it to look kind of watercolory and to absorb. Now, if you're going to do something like this, you're going to need to use a little more specific things, like these Fantastics make it like a pencil.
Oh, so you can get very detailed.
Right. So it's almost like having, you know, the ink pens, the ink pencils and stuff. And then you can get 2 and 3 colors, and you can be darker in the middle. But
Shading
these,
or
yeah, and these, and I didn't wet this because when I wet that at the beginning, it'll fade, it'll spread out, and then it'll,
hadn't thought about
and
that.
it'll start making green go into purple and
Bleeding into
right, bleeding. That's the word I
see.
was looking for. So I just wanted to point out the product here. You can use like this ink. This is an all-purpose ink, and
Is it that alcohol ink?
it's
or-
called no, it's
No, it's
called
all-
TSUKINEKO ink, and it's an all-purpose ink, and it'll go on natural fabrics really well. They don't say that you can't use it on synthetic, but I think it absorbs better in natural. And
So try it on a small scrap.
right, I
any
would
of
try that
these.
product better on something that's natural. It'll
That's a
be
good
more
point.
successful. And this Dye-Na-Flow, this is by Jacquard. This works well on any kind of fabrics. It can be polyesters, and you know, if you want to make a headband, you could end up with some stretchable lace,
Oh, that's a
which would
good
have
point.
some lycra in it, synthetic. And so you want to make sure that all those little fibers will take the dye or the ink. This isn't really ink, it's paint, but
Oh yeah, this.
it's very, very thin paint. So
But do you still add water?
I add water because it is extremely strong. Now I've even
Vibrant.
put, yes, I've even put some water with this one already. And I'm going to just wet my brush. And the one thing that I'm going to start out with is a wet piece.
So
if I'm
we
going to
just-
want it to look watercolory. And I'm just going to basically pick up my paint and start painting. And of course, if you have a surface where you're going to not want the color to change, you do want to put something underneath that might absorb. But do you see how the more water I put on, the more it colors down and makes it a little bit lighter. Now, if I went straight from the bottle to this, I want you to see how strong it is, because this is very, very intense.
Oh, it is.
So do you see the difference? So that's why, depending on what you want to do, if you want it strong, but then you can always put a little water with it and move that.
Maybe if there was a design part of it,
Right,
of the lace, you might
right.
want to emphasize
And
that.
you wanted to get a little bit more. But like if I wanted to make this flower green, you are going to probably want to start out with something a little more specific so that it doesn't bleed out into all of that. But do you see how that goes? It gets just
Well, that looks
takes
easy.
it
I
really
bet kids
easy.
would love to do this
Doesn't
too.
it? Yeah. And you can just paint it, and then once you get it all painted, you want to go, and I like these little eyedroppers also because I can take my water and add water to it, or I can take my paint and put it in here. And when I did that jacket bottom, I went and put all my colors, all the colors that were here on in there, on this, in the little holes. And then I took one and I thought, oh, that's too bright purple. So I took a little bit of brown and put it with that, or I put the little beige with it. And nothing in this color palette was this muted down. But because I kept adding more to it, each color to it, they kind of grade themselves down.
It does.
Yes. And so I just kept working with it until it picked up what color I wanted. And it was a lot of fun.
Well, I bet it would have been.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. So now if you wanted to make this into a little headband, all you have to do, and of course these are really popular with like babies and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you can just make a seam on the back like that, or you could tie it at the top, and you'd have a little bow. And you can also take this lace, because it's very forgiving, and you can zigzag stitch it flat.
That's on the front side.
Yes.
I see.
So don't make the seam, just put it flat together, and then if you had the right color, you won't even see that
You wouldn't
seam.
even see it.
Right. And then if you were wanting to put it together like with a little loop, I've seen these done with hair ponytail holders.
Oh, yes.
And I just took a piece of elastic, made a knot in it, and put the knot underneath. And then see, you just turn this back over
Fold it
top,
over.
and that would cover your knot.
Cute.
Well, if I wanted to do it that way and I didn't want to show my white, you know, I mean, who's going to see it under your hair?
Right.
But you can also paint that.
Oh.
So put that down there at the same time, and
Would this same technique work with like the thicker fabric paints that they use sometimes for scrapbooking, and it's a different texture than this? Does
Right.
it need to be like this
I
watercolor?
think it needs to be a watery type, because you want it to absorb into it, and then you want it also to stay soft.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
you
and this
don't-
other would crack, I think.
Right. Yeah. Or it will make it stiff, and you wouldn't get it at the same feel of your headband. So that works great
ideas.
with any kind of soft lace. These things work great if you didn't want to dye, you want to paint.
Want to paint. Okay. Just hadn't thought about doing it. And I have lots of pieces of lace from sewing projects, and so why not use it and maybe make a little brooch or make the headband or
Sure.
whatever. Good ideas. Thanks, Patty.
You bet. Thank you.